David Montgomery sets the running back market in 2023 NFL free agency, and Darren Waller escapes a crowded passing game with the Las Vegas Raiders for the Giants. That and more this week on the Footballguys Dynasty Show. And Jordan, David Montgomery, the new Jamal Williams, maybe Jamal Williams plus. And we were talking before the show what this does for DeAndre Swift.
Yeah, I asked you if this is a spot where Swift could fall out of the top 20, or is that just what we do with productive running backs, right? I mean, this is kind of like the Josh Jacobs thing last year where, hey, they bring in additional competition and, but it's funny because I think Swift's going to get some benefit of the doubt where other guys who've been more productive don't, which is going to be a weird situation. I mean, this can't feel great. And if you kind of look at the arc of DeAndre Swift's career in Detroit, you very much get the impression that it is a guy that they're not in love with. This is a pretty big sign of that. I mean, I think that they probably saw a little bit of the writing on the wall with Jamal Williams, that he wasn't a full 3-down back, right? That's not what they wanted to do. They wanted something added, a guy that they can trust kind of between the tackles that can be a every down back. They probably didn't see that out of Jamal Williams at the end of the year, would be my guess, even though he did what he did and had an awesome season. I think this is really interesting. I mean, it's interesting because it opens up a spot in Chicago, but it's also interesting because it creeps into a top 10 running back in DeAndre Swift. So and frankly, I think Montgomery's, you and I coming into the NFL, we're lower on him than consensus. And I think probably now we're higher on him than consensus as a player. So at least I am. So I think it's an interesting landing spot, and, it might be, they both just, they both sort of siphon off of each other and no one really benefits. It's going to be really interesting to see how this plays out.
Yeah, Lions are one of the more fascinating offenses for this year. Projected that Jared Goff is going to lead them. Do they get more out of Jameson Williams? I'm actually lower on Jameson Williams than I expected to be coming into year 2, with Amon-Ra St. Brown solidifying his status there. We'll see if they're done, adding to the passing game per se. Tight end could be a big spot for them, but they got 2 top 20 picks as well, and 2 more in round 2. So they have plenty of ammo. And that might be a spot that's discussed, that they draft a developmental quarterback. They could be in a spot there at number 6 overall. We'll see if some of the top 4 are still remaining at 6 with how we're trending with trade ups and the demand of the position. It might not be done there. But yeah, David Montgomery, again, 3-down profile, probably a little more than Jamal Williams. And DeAndre Swift, man, I mean, when you look back, you wonder if there were tea leaves, not really being the guy, being the workhorse, and really having that profile. Doesn't go in round 1. He goes very early round 2, but at no point, I still remember that game where it was almost like they were giving him carries to the point of he was just dying on the vine. I think it was a game against Pittsburgh, if that sounds right, but it was in like muddy conditions, snowy, wintry mixed conditions. That we call that springtime up there in North New York there. But yeah, I just remember that game where he was running. I think it was against Pittsburgh, and he's just running into the line. It's like, this is not DeAndre Swift. Like, they're giving him 40 touches, and you almost wonder, like, is that the pivot point to DeAndre Swift's career arc there? And yeah, David Montgomery, this is a plush spot where we love Latavius Murray, right? He falls out of favor after splashing a little bit as the starter for the Raiders. And this is almost, I think fantasy and dynasty GMs get a little tired. When you don't hit a big peak, and when you're 3, 4, 5 years into your career, Josh Jacobs effect gets here, and all of a sudden it's like, your old news. We're going for whoever is the shiniest. And so this is a very unshiny signing, but 3 for 18 is a big contract in NFL free agency land for the running back position. So David Montgomery, and we've seen DeAndre Swift have injury concerns. This is a massive spot, that if he ever gets some clarified, no Swift in the picture, or if he just takes that job and runs with it, and 3 for 18 as opposed to a rookie contract for Swift, as he just is not in the favorable glances there for that coaching staff. I don't know. We are trending in a very treacherous direction with DeAndre Swift. And then this just shows with running back, there's one ball, and if you're on the 1B side, it's not a good look.
Yeah, Detroit number 1 in expected running back points last year,
right?
Number 2 in expected running back points last year with 28.6. So again, very
tons
lucrative.
of goal line, and if you get a guy consolidating that a little bit, this is one of the more fun offenses, especially in the NFC, that this could be explosive. And when you say the lead running back, that's pretty exciting, because Montgomery, let's be fair, with Swift still there, he's not going to be in the consensus top 15 or so running backs. So he provides value.
The other thing too is they're playing a little bit different of a game again. As a team, do you want to spend on this as maybe a different conversation, right, from an NFL team building perspective? But they're the favorite to win the NFC North. And right, so if you're sort of coming at it from that lens, you're like, all right, we need someone that can ice games for us. We need someone that we can sort of trust and form in offenses, right? We need someone that we can rely on to play from ahead. For the first time really in a while, they're thinking that way, right? So that's kind of the role that David Montgomery would fit, almost better than he would in Chicago. I wrote in the running back free agent preview for the site, I said he's basically a guy that plays to the quality of the situation. I mean, David Montgomery is perfect for a situation that is very lucrative for running backs, because he can do basically everything, right? He can catch, he can run. Again, I don't think he's not prime LaDainian Tomlinson, but he's adequate kind of across the board in a way that we like, that gives you a lot of optionalities for scoring outs. Just to harken back to that game that you mentioned with Swift, it was week 10 of 2021. It was at Pittsburgh. He went 33 carries, 130 yards. It was a 16-16 tie. Since that game, he has had four games where he has had double-digit carries. The following week, which would have been week 11 of 2021, and then week 1 of 2022, week 13 of 2022, and then week 17 of 2022.
Sounds like the new Jerick McKinnon. If he gets significant work, he needs a month off, and again, tough position, tough workload. But man, that's, certainly not looking like a guy that's going to turn into what we want with the 10 carries, 5 receptions, having a high enough workload, certainly with David Montgomery in there. And let's not bury the ancillary part of this, which is he was already a free agent, but you mentioned before the show, that means David Montgomery is not going back to Chicago. And so Khalil Herbert right now, light pencil, he is the starter. I don't expect them to ignore the position, but this is a little window. I've seen Herbert moved in some trades where he carries more elevated value than I would say for a mid to later day 3 guy that, yes, he's had some spot starts, but to think that he's going to go into week 1 uncontested is a pretty lofty ask with free agency as well. A number of running backs still out there, plus the draft. So that's going to be one of, if someone comes knocking, or you can consolidate in a dynasty trade, don't hold Herbert like he's untradeable and like the assumption that he's going to be the week 1 starter. It's a possibility, but there's plenty of landmines to go and to avoid.
Yeah, and the other thing too is we have the ability now to think about, just in this research I did, I put it in the team building guide, right? The survivorship and the threat rate stuff, right? That's essentially how likely it is for a running back to have someone drafted with superior pedigree. And you look at that round 4 Khalil Herbert type range. I mean, that is into 30+% every year, right? So again, he doesn't have an established guy on the depth chart either, right? They're going to be in on a running back, right? They are going to address the position. He's not going to walk in there day one ready to go. Again, we were talking about this before the show. This is a classic team where they should do what the Jets did, right? The Jets did this, to their credit. It didn't succeed, but it maybe it did. We'll see. But it was the right approach, which was just keep adding weapons, right? We don't know if Zach Wilson's the guy. Well, let's give him no excuse, right? It's what Philly did with Jalen Hurts. It's what the Jets did with Zach Wilson. And it's frankly what the Bears need to do with Justin Fields, right? There should be no excuse. There should be no question after this year, right? There's no issue with he didn't have the quality players around him. They did that with DJ Moore, right? They should be in the conversation to take a top 10 wide receiver in this draft, right? They should add to the running back position, right? There's some talk that, Darren Waller was actually in a trade offer to them for Vegas moving up to 1, right? That didn't obviously come to fruition, but that would have been a pass catcher instead of DJ Moore, would have been Darren Waller. So don't be surprised if they are double dipping, triple dipping at these skill position players, because we know what the formula is, right? They need to see if Fields is the guy. They need to give him the guys to find out.
And there's a lot of landmines still in free agency, independent of the draft. Kareem Hunt still out there, Jamal Williams, Miles Sanders, Devin Singletary, Damian Harris. There's potentially cuts out there. There's Deonta Foreman, Alexander Madison, James Robinson even. I mean, these are all threatening players and profiles to Khalil Herbert with where his standing is. So this is not an open and shut case for Herbert, and the Bears rising on offense might look good right now for Khalil Herbert, but it's a long way to stay healthy. And the problem is, we've said this before, you almost need an insulating player. And that's why we said, Alexander Madison is good news for Dalvin Cook, because he's the clear number 2 in Minnesota for all those years, but he keeps away added threats to Dalvin Cook. And right now there's no insulation for Khalil Herbert on that Bears depth chart. So they have to add live warm bodies, and they're probably going to do it the best way they can. They're not going to add it with the lowest level, like, we're going to add Justin Jackson and we're going to add Rex Burkhead. Like, that's probably not going to be the 2-man addition that they choose to supplement. They're going to go big-ish, as you said, a threat there in the draft where they have some capital, or it's going to be one of the notables I just named. And that was a lot. That was a slew, more than a handful. And frankly, if you were a free agent running back, you're looking around these depth charts and you would say, Khalil Herbert and what else? Like, that's
Travis
a good one
Homer
for me.
was just added by Schefter. Schefter just reported a minute ago that Travis Homer signed 2 years worth a maximum of $4.5 million with the Bears. So
that's one.
That's one, but I don't think that's done, right?
No. That's not.
Be a sign that they're done.
It would be better than Homer with another one here. So, and that's really low level money, and he's more of a pass-centric guy. So anyway, we're catching the news cycle on the right side this week, Jordan. A lot of times it's like we finished recording, and it's like before the ink is dry, there's already been 2 or 3 things that have occurred. Another big news item that came out today is Darren Waller being traded from the Raiders to the Giants, and I don't know about you, Jordan. I really like this one. That it was so crowded. The equation for Darren Waller when he was a budding, automatic top 3, top 4 guy at the position, it was a great formula. Good enough quarterback play, and he was the wide receiver 1 for that depth chart. You get Devontae Adams. He was also injured last year. Things change. And now you've got the variable of quarterback play, but you've also got a greener pasture going over to the Giants. They don't really have a wide receiver 1 right now. Darren Waller, as it projects, even if they draft the wide receiver in round 1, the answer is probably still Darren Waller. And we saw a better play, not great play, better play from Daniel Jones. So I think the equation is a lot better than Devontae Adams. They brought Jacoby Myers in. This was not good news for Darren Waller's upside over there at the Raiders. Shift him over to the Giants. He's got a chance to get back into the top 3 or 4.
Yeah. I'm with you. Where does Daniel Jones fit on the good enough scale of that sentence, right? You said number 1 option with a good enough quarterback. I mean, is he on that scale, right? I think, good
I think
enough.
He is tier 2, tier 3 with how I look at it in quartiles, in the NFL. So somewhere between, quarterback 9 and 24. And probably somewhere in the meaty middle or the back half of that. But that's good enough when you say we don't have a strong wide receiver 1. And they brought back Sterling Shepard, Wan'Dale Robinson. They've got Isaiah Hodgins, they're slapping stuff together. And even if they draft someone in the 20s, I don't think that's going to be enough to move us off of Darren Waller and if he's healthy, what his projection would be there.
Yeah, and I always look, I mean, one of the things I'm always shooting for at tight end is, can you give me the tight end 1 finish, right? Is that in your range of outcome? Because if it's not, you blend in, right? That's might be a little unfair, but that's really how I look at it. And I think when you look at Waller, right, again, we'll sort of see what the volume looks like with this offense, right? I mean, that's probably a space we'll need to evaluate a little bit more. But when you look at players that, just in terms of his overall stats in his career, he's a 98th percentile target per route run guy, a 98th percentile yards per route run guy at the tight end position. I mean, you're looking, those are major numbers, right? Those are in the efficiency neighborhood of what you need to get to be a tight end 1 overall. And again, I think if he played every snap for the Giants, right, if he ran close to every route, right, 90+%, I think he's in the conversation to be the tight end 1, which before this trade, I wasn't sure we could get to that volume, right? I think that he has the potential. He might be the cheapest guy that has that in his range of outcomes at this point.
Yep. And then a depth chart, as we always peruse running back, hyper important for our analysis and the arbitrage, and also just mining opportunities on the cheap here for Dynasty. Miami Dolphins, they were looking like they had, it's like that Simpsons one. I got nothing. Who's got something? I got nothing, kind of clip where it looked like a glaring hole at a chasm there, a Grand Canyon for the running back depth chart. And they don't have a lot of picks. They have a couple in the top 175 of the draft. So that was going to be a team that we were going to be very focused if they didn't make a splash in free agency. Well, they ended up bringing back both of their own. They're notable free agents, Jeff Wilson and Raheem Mostert. So this is an opportunity. We saw Jeff Wilson be the preferred option of those two, and we saw that in the same iteration of this offense last year. So Jeff Wilson, Raheem Mostert filling those spots, and now it doesn't look too rosy, even if on day 2 we see a running back drafted at least at the outset here.
Yeah. And I thought that was a potential team to maybe land a higher price guy, to land maybe a whether Dalvin Cook was sort of on that radar, whether it was, that he was sort of in that conversation. But listen, they kind of go back, right? Do you think this, let's put this on the scale of Chicago, right? The Khalil Herbert deal. Do you think this precludes them from making another splash at the position? What do you think if they make another investment, what type of investment is this? Is this a day 2 draft pick investment? Is this Dalvin Cook becomes available and you go that route? Is it a late day 3 investment? What sort of priority investment would you say this backfield is at this point?
Well, what is the stock phrase? More in the romantic vein, they say someone's only as they're only as have as much allegiance as their options, basically. And so if Dalvin Cook were to become available, or someone of high import, then again, I think they can throw out their other plans. We've seen them make some big moves, for big players that can help them in that tight window here for contending and trying to be one of the big boys in the AFC. And frankly, it's going to take a lot, to be one of the halves and to get to the Final Four, hopefully get to the Super Bowl and have this perfect storm work out in the AFC here. So I don't think this would preclude them. Now, I think unless they get a glaring opportunity, you mentioned Dalvin Cook or someone there, I do think it will preclude them from outwardly just signing a free agent off that list that I read a few minutes ago. And I think if you bring in someone, it's probably not going to be in the 50s with one of their pick there. It's going to be more in the 80s. And I don't think that player, if that's Tank Bigsby or Chase Brown, or, I think those are some the types of players that would be in that range and that they're looking at 85 overall. I don't think that player would come in and run roughshod and pass those 2 solid veterans outside of injury in the first, couple months of the season. And we typically, we talk about the trajectory for day 2 guys. Round 3, a little different than round 2, but it's usually a mid-season sort of thing outside of being pushed up by injury. So I still think it would leave them largely unaffected to start the year for this window to be a starter on a dynamic offense pending, and they also addressed the backup quarterback situation. We know with Tua, it's a very tenuous situation with his career arc, concussions, injuries in general there. But this was one of the electric offenses in the NFL in 2022. And so at their peak powers, that starting option, and Jeff Wilson was an addition with a day 3 pick last year. So I just think this whole combination, really good news for Jeff Wilson. He's one of those veterans that we've seen good things from him, and he's not very pricey. So this is why you hold running backs and you don't just go, Jeff Wilson's a free agent. He's probably not going to land somewhere good. Plenty of times they do. So David Montgomery, it's like, I should just ship him off, get myself a future 2nd round pick. Really? No, you wait through free agency. We've talked you through it for 2-3 months. You hold firm with these guys you got on your roster from week 18, because you could roll snake eyes. And guess what? Worst case, you drop them in August. You drop them for your 2nd or 3rd round rookie pick if need be, or if that's the plan. But just, you're going to get enough good situations that make it worthwhile. You hold all these running backs to see what you got.
Yeah, and we're already seeing some payoff from guys that we've held, right? P. Ryan, Penny, right? These guys that were back end roster guys at different points. Penny's a potential, we'll see, right? That we should start an index, like how much investment do you need in addition to the guys you have indexed? Because with Penny, it's pretty high, right? Like you need some insulation there. But P. Ryan, kind of the insulation of Javonte Williams, right? Like, so some of the stuff's interesting in terms of how these situations are going to clear up. There's a depth of running backs right now, right? That's my overall takeaway kind of from basically them not going off the board quickly, from, that Ackler and some other guys are sort of in trade negotiations. I think one of the biggest takeaways is that there's a tremendous amount of depth at the position right now. And as a result, you're seeing some discounts because supply is low, demand's not that high because teams have a lot of them, and you're seeing some discount type situations. I wonder if that's going to open up, it's going to maybe even threaten more depth charts and open up other opportunities that maybe we don't see as we sit here right now.
Yeah. And my other thing would be, don't freak out, that just because you end up, and again, we're preaching to the choir between ourselves, but you get running backs that end up as number 2s or really talented number 3s. You gotta let attrition take hold. This is sort of the same thing about if you're sitting in super flex or 2 quarterback and you're holding these backup quarterbacks. You haven't even got to the part that you have these guys. Their function is in season. You have them, and every week there are going to be options at those two positions specifically where there is such a tangible, not starter, not valuable right now for lineup decisions. Next week could be hyper valuable. So I think that's really important that checks watch. It's March. We're going to, in a few weeks, checks watch. It's April. It's May.
Mm-hmm.
You see where I'm going with this. We have not gotten to the point, and in July and August, you might see 1 or 2 where an injury occurs, and we have a situation where week 1, all of a sudden we have some. I still remember the Tyson Williams. Remember, it was J.K. Dobbins goes down, Gus Edwards. I can't remember if Gus Edwards went down as well or if he was already out. But the point is, they got down, and Tyson Williams, week 1 starter. He saw like 12 carries in the first half. And so it changed quickly to Latavius Murray. But the point is, you can get things changing by week 1, but you are really buying into with these backs. And so you get the in-season machinations. So you can't freak out if right now you have Chuba Hubbard or Jalen Warren, or I'm just, naming a lot of guys. You have Mike Boone, you got Gus Edwards, you got Travis Homer, and just, you need to see how this lays out. And it doesn't mean everybody you have today you'll be able to keep all the way there, but you'll at least get a lot closer and say, well, this guy's number 4. And some of these depth charts get down that deep, but it might not happen for half a season, and you got to circle back with a roster spot. You just can't keep them all. But that's when you make the best bets you can based on talent, upside of the situation, maybe riskiness of the players in front of them. So again, and Nate asked in the chat, how long do I hold on to Mike Boone? As long as possible. There's not really, you might have roster pressure with cut downs, but that's generally a shallow format thing. And it's tough to keep unless they're clarified and actually good backups, through a cut down to like 20 roster spots or something. But generally, you don't even have to really decide till rookie draft time. And for a lot of people, that's May or June. So no pressure, and you get to see the entire free agency, entire draft. And now we can make an assessment, which makes it a lot easier.
Yeah. Yeah. The other thing too, like there's a couple of interesting spots that haven't dropped and haven't been fantasy viable that I thought might be. I thought Jacoby Myers might be a guy that could potentially see a difference making role. I'm not sure that's going to be the case in Vegas. Right. Michael Thomas, I thought there was a chance that he could exit New Orleans and land up with a different team. Could he have been an option for Kansas City or Buffalo, for example? That's not going to happen. He's back there. So like there hasn't been a ton of movement at receiver, which is, it's not that good of a class, but I think it's interesting. We haven't really seen, the Juju, DJ Shark type of landing spots where you could say, hey, maybe this moves some of the needle. It just hasn't really happened yet either.
Absolutely. Chad Parsons, Jordan McNamara, episode 140, as I guess, 145 of the Football Guys Dynasty Show.
Yeah.
Exactly. So we're getting there. And actually, that means we're coming up on the 3-year anniversary of this show because we started right around the NFL draft, right after the NFL draft 3 years ago. And we're going towards 5-6 weeks remaining before the draft. It's going to shake things up, and we're knee deep in free agency here. Got some notable trades, and 2 we put together as one of the players we didn't include in the opening segment is DJ Moore. So another big move here, and a savvy move by the Bears, because as wide receiver prices go through the roof in the NFL, we're trending towards 30 million plus with some of these signings and extensions that are going to come with the next crop of young players here. But DJ Moore, 17 million or so. He's still got a few years of insulation. Bears end up getting him instead of getting possibly another first-round pick in their package, moving down from 101 to 19 with Carolina. They end up getting DJ Moore and building around Justin Fields in full force. So we've got a couple of deals here, but set the table for us, Jordan, on how DJ Moore looks here with his profile entering it. And it's a critical offseason now with him changing teams, a lot of pressure for him to take that number 1 role and run with it in Chicago.
Yeah. So the couple of trades here I thought were interesting, and it'd be a good lens to kind of look through him. One of the initial reactions was, oh, look, he actually has a good quarterback to throw to him. Maybe, right? If you were to start looking at, when Justin Fields throws an attempt, he's basically kind of right in the middle of the position in terms of points that attempt is worth, right? In terms of receiving yards, receptions, and touchdowns, right? You look at the fantasy points it actually generates. It's about middle of position. The problem is that on a per drop back basis, right, when he actually drops back to pass, it's a very low number because Justin Fields scrambles or is sacked on more than a quarter of his dropbacks. Now, if you think that might sound like a lot, it is. Since 2008 of quarterbacks with at least 500 dropbacks, he is the highest, what I call a lost dropback rate, right? So it's either a sack or a scramble. He is the largest by a wide margin. Again, he's at 25.9% on his career. The next highest is Tyrod Taylor at 18%. Mike Vick, 17.8. Colin Kaepernick, 17.1, Deshaun Watson, 17, right? Those are miles and miles away. Okay. And so one of the things that you end up seeing is even if you keep a target share, right? DJ Moore had about a 26% target share, right? 26% of the passes attempted in Carolina last year were thrown to him. Even if you maintain the same for DJ Moore going to Chicago, the problem with that is it's a loss of 20 targets, right? He's now dropped below 100. Now you might say, hey, he'll scramble less. He'll do some of these things. Those are very sticky stats year over year. He was a high scramble, high sack guy in college. He's a high scramble, high sack guy in his first 2 years in the NFL. And that scramble rate stuff is really, really high. So it's really going to need to be coming down in the sack stuff, which is honestly, it's on him more than it is on any part of the offensive line. He just holds the ball so long. So I'm super skeptical of the DJ Moore, right? I think a lot of people are excited because this is the best quarterback he's played with. And that may be true, but from a fantasy, from the actual adding up of targets and that turning into points, this is rough sledding for DJ Moore. I'm hard out on him at the, I think, relatively optimistic move price that has happened from Carolina to Chicago.
Yeah, and targets pay the bills. So it's 100%. Really hard to overcome and swim upstream when you say, well, we expect dominant production, but we're going to give you 98 targets. We're going to give you 106 targets. Like, this is really tough in terms of having a sky high touchdown rate or conversion rate, or you're breaking so many things after the catch, which DJ Moore has some of these skills, but he hasn't been a big touchdown guy. We have a big enough sample size to say it's probably not going to revert all the way around. When you say a career low guy, Jacoby Myers is another one, for example, they don't just turn into, this isn't a regression thing. This is a building what is your mean level of touchdown rate when you build up to hundreds of catches in the NFL. And yeah, I love what you were talking about, just pressures turning into sacks, dropbacks turning into sacks. And this is worse than Jalen Hurts year one. I was looking at a lot of the stats of these notable, 3-year and fewer seasons so far, quarterbacks just on the upward trajectory. Where is Justin Fields? And, some great stuff running, he throws the ball downfield, but in terms of avoiding the bad play, in terms of reacting to pressure, holding the ball, all these negative things, he needs to improve quite a bit, as you mentioned, because the attempts need to be there. It doesn't have to be, we need to see progress. And we're seeing them adding to the position. Cole Kmet is a viable option. Darnell Mooney, viable option. They paid a lot for Chase Claypool. So this isn't DJ Moore walking into a situation where there's no competition for targets. You can say he's the best version. He's the best, 1A option that they have. But it's not just going to be a free run where he's going to see such a sky high percentage of market share. And so those two things where you say, probably not a facilitator in Justin Fields that's going to distribute like a point guard. And then you say not a dominating market share from DJ Moore within the prism of a lower volume passing game. You could see a lot of progress. You could see DJ Moore as the number one, but man, that whole combination coming together and saying DJ Moore has top 12 upside this year, that's a pretty dicey equation. And just what part of what Jordan and I said are you banking on to fuel a top 12 season? Because you can say something in a vacuum, but it's also like if you say a quarterback has top 6 upside, look at who they're competing against. You're figuring Devontae Adams, Justin Jefferson. Look at the equations and profiles of guys. So to say that he's going to beat out everybody but 8, 9, 10 options in the NFL, tall task here for DJ Moore.
Oh, for sure. And so I'm pretty skeptical on it. And you look like there's a huge correlation between, I think people overestimate how much of an impact a quarterback has in terms of like the quality of the pass thrown, right? When you look at the way points are scored in fantasy, right? Targets, you said a huge driver of it. There's north of 85% correlation between targets and points scored. Okay. That's a huge number, as big of a number as you'll find anything correlated in anything we ever talk about by like an order of magnitude of probably 2, right? You don't get anything above 50% correlated. 40% is like really awesome. 85+% should stop you in your tracks. Okay. The target is the most important thing to determine a wide receiver success. If you tell me the targets, right, we can just kind of add those up and they're going to perform within a pretty close range of outcomes around that target number. If DJ Moore is not topping 120, 130 targets, he's not a top 20 guy. He's just not, right? And if he's not going to be at triple digits, which is where his target share on last year's dropbacks would have put him, on last year's attempts would have put him, that's a big deal. And the other thing too is like, even if they go and decide to drop back to pass a lot more, right? They were the bottom 3 of the league in terms of dropbacks and plays and the like. Even if that grows, it has to grow a lot because of how much Justin Fields loses those dropbacks, right? And again, that's extremely correlated year over year. So you're running into with DJ Moore a lot of, my pitch for the article that I'm writing on this is DJ Moore has a math problem. And it's just, you're just running into a lot of roadblocks. So like our trades here, I don't know if you mentioned it, but our trades, like I'm out on these costs.
Yeah, and I would add one more on my custom rankings. I have a wide receiver 25, and when it's mainly a floor thing, that at some point, you run out of true ceiling plays. And for DJ Moore, I only have a 17%, historical. It's kind of a future cast thing of his chances for a career year beyond this current static point, and his career year so far is wide receiver 16. So a 17% shot is not for a guy that hasn't finished in the top 5 or 6 mid-career. that's not really the type of number you're looking for. So he's not really a ceiling play at this point, unless we see some major graphic change with Chicago and Justin Fields. And, there's some macro things going on around him that will need to change. And it's not impossible. But again, you're betting, it's all about outcomes and probabilities. And when you're betting on something to change, that's a tougher bet than if you're betting on something to stay the same. So yeah, the two trades, as we mentioned, we got FFPC Superflex 106 for DJ Moore. You mentioned you're out. And again, in Superflex, that means even in FFPC, you're probably talking 2 or 3 quarterbacks going in the top 5. And now you're down to, you might get the running back 2. You might get the wide receiver. You're going to get a wide receiver likely with more pedigree than DJ Moore, even if wide receiver isn't our favorite bet in FFPC with the shallow rosters. But you have a lot of liquidity at 106 to go hunting for probably a wide. I'm looking at this list. I mean, you certainly could get Deontay Johnson plus. You could certainly get plenty of these wide receivers that I have in my top 20 without much maneuvering beyond 106, I would imagine.
Yeah, I would. Right. I think you can use that piece in a package that gets you an elite quarterback, right? It can, like, those are all sorts of tools available to you, especially in Superflex, right? Those are all tools that are available to you. I usually don't do this, but wide receiver 1 over DJ Moore, I think my concern is that's JSN to Chicago at 9. And then I'm really like, I don't know if you remember this, but when the Bills drafted Josh Allen, I was like, we were literally on a video together at the time that happened. And I think I was laying on my computer keyboard when that happened. It'd be a similar type of reaction to JSN being drafted by the Bears. So, and heck, maybe it'll turn out the same way that the Josh Allen thing, maybe it'll all be rosy, but that's not something that I want to see. But that said, like, I would take the pick and give me the liquidity and we'll figure it out later on.
And the other one is a classic 3-for-1 package up in Superflex. We got DJ Moore 108 and 201 for the 101 on the clock.
This is run over grandma, right? Like you run over your grandma to accept this deal. I think that would be my take on it.
Yeah, and again, I think 108, you're still in a pretty spicy range because you figure 4 quarterbacks, you figure at least a couple running backs, and then you're still going to be in round 1 wide receiver land. But when you can go to, this is an offshoot, and this is a total Jordan moment because this is the exact thing you would do in a moment like this of answering a trade question. But I find I actually listen to, I love listening to these mock draft shows because one stock line that people say is, well, Bijan Robinson's one of the best players in the draft. Everyone pretty much has him in the top 5, 10 of their best players, and that differs from where you're actually going to draft someone. I understand that. But I actually heard a mock draft where they're like, they got to the end of the first round. They're like, well, I had nowhere to put Bijan Robinson. You have to put him in a spot. Like you have to have, like, I think there's 5, 6, 7 spots that I could see him going without him going in the top 10. And I think that's just, it may not be exactly what you're thinking of where he's going to go, but at some point beyond even, beyond 15 or 16, someone will sit there and say, he's the best player on our board and we will take him. Even if you have a veteran right now where you're like, oh, he's going to be our starter this year. But 2024, he will not be our starter because we have Bijan Robinson, and that veteran might get injured, and it's just Bijan Robinson from that point forever. So I think you have to look at it through that prism. That could be the Chargers. Just because the Cowboys bring back Tony Pollard does not mean they don't draft Bijan Robinson. I think you have to look at it in that prism. So he will go in the first round. It's going to be a crime against humanity if he does not. And an NFL team will see that as best player available. And again, I think with that sort of assurances here with the 101, I mean, you can add 205 to this, you can add 210, whatever. You get to 101, you consolidate roster spots, and you get that sort of profile at 101, and don't let DJ Moore stop you.
Yeah. I mean, this is a classic deal from like elite player to depth. And you just like, this is a great trade, like to take the package of this, like this preserves you. Like this is an awesome trade if you want to pick like 5th consistently in your drafts. Like this is a trade you do, right? Like this is a road to like a middling, like a non-playoff, but no 101 pick. Like this is kind of how you end up with that by doing this trade.
Right. And again, you can win this deal. It's possible, but you probably, like, if Bijan Robinson hits and he's a first round startup pick, I don't know how 108 and 201 can level this deal. It makes it near impossible. So that's the part you're playing, is that Bijan Robinson isn't that good or has a couple of injuries early on that really derail things and takes him in a different direction. All right, we got a shallow.
Let me read you a quote.
Yes.
Let me read you a quote from Courtney Cronin. She's ESPN beat reporter for the Bears. Feels like Khalil Herbert assumes the number one role in the Chicago backfield. In 2 seasons, he's rushed 232 times for 1164 and 6 touchdowns. Adding Travis Homer to the room that has Tristan Ebner and Kyrie Blossom game means the Bears probably look to the draft for more help. Like, I already think that narrative starts to bubble, right? The Khalil Herbert is the running back one type.
Copy the first half of that and send that with your offers that you're selling
Correct.
Khalil Herbert in the next few hours.
Correct.
All right, so we got shallow 20-man rosters in this deal. Terrace Marshall, opportunity for him with DJ Moore out of the mix just to look better in the optics here of what his range of outcomes could be. Traded for 208 in this one quarterback format.
You were higher on him probably coming out than I was. He fell a little bit further, right? You're going to be higher on the good second round wide receivers just because I'm not high on as a class. So you're just going to be higher on the good ones. And he was a good one. Even though he fell further than probably we expected. Listen, like there's a chance that he becomes the guy, but he's done nothing to date. And color me skeptical of that. My only thought is, like, with 208, what are you doing that's any better than that? Are you kind of hoping that you reset the clock with someone in the same range? Before I just sort of took a sidestep, I would say, all right, can Terrace Marshall and 209 get me to 201, something like that? Can I get something that can change my reality? Because in 20-man rosters, like, Terrace Marshalls of the world, the wide receivers that you're going to draft there, they're already butting up against your roster limit as it is. So this feels lateral to me. I understand it. Like, again, if this was a tight end premium, something like that, and it's a 40-man roster and you want to sort of reset the clock with the pick liquidity, I get it. But in this format, I think you got to be trying to do something more than just laterally move. Yeah,
you're always trying to consolidate, but I think, it's tough to get that trading partner in that environment unless there's one team in the league where, they pretty much go 10 deep and they're like, I got to build out my depth. Terrace Marshall, like, I have adjusted pretty rapidly because he's 2 years in. His 1.04 yards per route run is pretty horrific. And that's pretty sticky. I mean, it doesn't always follow, fantasy starter seasons and things like that. But the point is, he's not been playing well. And you can say that situation has not been good and this is an expanded opportunity. But I mean, come on. I mean, his profile said he should come in, play a lot better than this. And he's an ancillary wide receiver. So I think this is a pretty good return. I think 208 gives you more options. Yes, you might be looking at a day 3 running back, but I'll make this pitch. Ancillary in 20-man rosters, give me a day 3 running back that I can see winning the number 2 job or being in that injury away camp. Give me that over just another wide receiver where we don't know what's going to happen. Like, he's not necessarily the number 1 guy. I actually think between Marshall and Laviska Shenault's cheaper. And I think NFL-wise, we've seen more from Shenault, and that's not saying great things. It's just saying I think we're ignoring Shenault when he's cheaper, and I think a lot of people just assume it's Marshall and assuming that they're done. They're not going to be done. Something's going to occur probably. And to say that it has to be Marshall and not Shenault, I think there's a lot of things wrong with this equation. And give me 208. You can trade for a veteran. You can trade 208 with your other second to get up into the first. You can trade 208 back and get a future second, try to get in that lottery for an early second. So I think you have a lot more flexibility. In Terrace Marshall, there might be a couple teams at this price point in the whole league quasi-interested. So that would be my one concern is you use Marshall as an asset, not many options. 208, you can go shopping and do a variety of things after this. I mean, you might be able to get Tyler Lockett. You might be able to get a wide receiver that if you just go off for Terrace Marshall, you can't get.
Yeah, the only other pushback I would say is, like, so we're recording this on Tuesday. This trade happened Friday, and you've already done this, right? So my concern for you is, did you just this feels like you just sort of did the lateral thing. Did you try and package him, right? How many offers did you really make before you said, I'll do this one, right? Because the time would say, by the time that this actually got in in the quotes and picked up by us, right? It was only 48 hours. Like, did it really get enough of a push to go up higher, right? That would have just been because I'm constantly angling for that, right? Constantly trying, maniacally package 2 players for one. This is a classic example of one where I hope the person spent enough time trying to do it.
Yeah. Last one, we've got FFPC 1 quarterback, Tony Pollard, and a 4th for a 24 first and a 3rd. So upgrading from 4th to 3rd, and then you're getting that 1st.
The mythical Tony Pollard for a 1st. It actually happened.
How you feeling about Pollard?
I think I want the 1st, right? Again, in the format, Pollard's kind of pushing maybe a top 30 asset. I'm not super convinced. I'm not super safe, right? I think unless he goes Austin Eckler, you can probably replicate him 80-90% of him with someone a lot cheaper. That would kind of be my angle. And then you preserve your pick flexibility into the future. And listen, if Pollard goes off, I don't think he's worth that much more than a future 1st. So, you could even buy him back if you wanted, or buy the equivalent version, right? Buy someone cheaper. I mean, in season, there's a chance that pick could get you a guy like Austin Eckler or something like that, depending on what that team's direction is. So I would take the pick, preserve the pick, and just sort of pocket it and let the other guy take Pollard, while paying a premium for him.
Yeah, I would add a couple things, which is that 1st obviously gives you latitude, not even that you have to spend it per se, but it gives you that in your back pocket to say, I can spend that to supplement. And then the other part about FFPC is there's a lot of injury away running backs that are available on the waiver wire. Frankly, so many that you're going to have to choose the best. Who do you hold and who do you toss out there through the bye week, through a changing and evolving situation for the best and highest upside opportunities as the season goes along. So again, to find running back production is a little easier because it's harder to hoard and it's harder to stockpile as many as you may want on your bench. So that 1st provides flexibility. The fact that you could maybe trade your current year, 2023 1st, to supplement the running back position. But I just think in general, at running back, even if you lose a Pollard, I will mention he's returning from injury. Let's not pretend like it's an assumption that he's going to be as great as he was at his peak powers last year. And Dallas still has to go through the draft. Zeke was getting goal line opportunities. It's not all roses and butterflies and rainbows here for Tony Pollard. So he's also 26. It's a dynasty league. So keep that in mind that they brought him back and it's not on some massive deal. So you have a lot of things working in that direction. And a 1st is pretty highly valuable in FFPC as a tool and as an agent to facilitate your team building, even if you aren't sitting there next year at 105 or 110 drafting a rookie with that pick. All right. We got a couple quotes here at the end of the show, and one featuring Jackson Smith-Njigba, who you mentioned earlier in the show. Someone mentioned, I think my cutoff would be 104. I think Jameson Williams is a better wide receiver prospect than anyone in this class outside of Smith-Njigba.
Well, my take on Jackson Smith-Njigba is pretty simple. He buried and forced Jameson Williams to transfer. He also outproduced Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson and a probable future top 15 pick in Marvin Harrison Jr. He's a good player. So I'm pretty confident in him as being like the wide receiver 1. Again, I haven't delved too far into that, but that's a resume that's hard for me to think that someone's going to go over that, especially when he did it younger, right? Just don't be, this is kind of a keep it simple, stupid type of situation with Smith-Njigba. The question that I have though is, how much do you want to invest in wide receivers, right? We can really like the wide receiver 1 in a class, but even still, right, it's probably a 55-60% hit rate at, for them to ever produce a top 24 seasonal finish, right? We've done this before, right, where you just go back to the Jefferson class, right, where it was Jefferson, a firm tier behind Rager, Judy, and Lamb. And, everyone sort of fought that out for months. And then it ends up being Justin Jefferson and Justin Herbert falling to the end of that first round, where guys like Swift, guys like Jalen Rager, Akers, Dobbins, right, they all went at the top half of the first round, and it was the guys that ended up falling later on, right? That's the cautionary tale at wide receiver, right? Do you want to really pick favorites, or would you rather pick the guy that, the fourth first round wide receiver off the board? That has historically been a pretty good investment when you're getting a lot to move down. So that would just be the one thing that I like Jackson Smith and Jigba. He's probably going to be the wide receiver one. I probably won't have much of him because I think it's a sucker's bet. It's a sucker's bet typically.
Yeah, and we can say he was coming back from an ACL with Jameson Williams. We can say that, that really didn't count. It was a red shirt, but he played. He really wasn't a factor. And you have Amon-Ra St. Brown, a target hog there, and they could be adding a tight end. I mean, you could argue that last year was a relatively rosy opportunity for Jameson Williams, missed. And now what does it look like? That it changes the trajectory, when you have such an overt red shirt-ish rookie year. It does matter. Life passes you by. The tides of the NFL with giving a team a full offseason opportunity to do things across the roster and specifically at your positional depth chart. So yeah, I think resetting and saying it's about Smith and Jigba, but it also is about an early first this year in general versus Jameson Williams. And I have them a tier apart. I have a Smith and Jigba in my wide receiver tier 4, and then Jameson Williams in tier 5. And Jameson Williams, again, right now, he had a pretty good profile coming into the NFL, and he got pedigree. But, again, wide receiver, only one guy really eats in a lot of these depth charts. And if you say the answer is Amon-Ra St. Brown, we could see some decent games, but the predictability and the strong target load for Jameson Williams might be tough to come by this year.
Absolutely. All right, hey, I have a question for you. Yep. I have one. I have one. How do you react to the following statement? Quote, fun fact, when I get sick, I eat high vibration foods such as fruit and drink a lot of water, and I don't take no medicine. Next quote, the body will heal itself. We don't need medicine to get better. That's just what you're told. Do you have any reaction to
Brown.
that?
That's AJ Brown. I saw that earlier. Yeah, and someone was like, "I'm fading him in Dynasty because of this." I can say I have lots of fruit and lots of water, and I seem to be faring pretty well. So I don't.
Yes.
I say I will say this: he is he holds weight on a little easier than I do, being plus 40 pounds on me and looking like a rocked up running back in the NFL, and he runs like a full mature sprinting deer. Oh, by the way, did you see Tyreek Hill run the 60? Did you happen to see that this week? Well, he's doing this, like, he just walks into track. Like, again, his whole life is track, but like he goes out there and these are legit. They've been training in track and field for forever. And Tyreek Hill used to do that, not so much anymore. He lapped everybody. He smoked them. And so I don't know if that was just one heat or how this works, but he was clearly superior. And so I think I wrote cheetah gonna cheetah because he's just, it just reminds you, he's 28, 29 years old. That's ancient in track and field days. And that is for a speed wide receiver. We pretty much saw Deshaun Jackson. I think we saw Mike Wallace extend into his 30s as a legit, still scaring safeties back, in the NFL. But generally, you see some erosion there. And Tyreek Hill, we'll see when that occurs. But it seems like he's still got the juice, and that was fun to see in Trackland. Yeah, we got one more here, and this is Isaiah Pacheco. Pacheco is either going to increase in value the next month or drop significantly. What do you think about that Chiefs depth chart? And we always talk about, are there blockers? They added everybody under the sun, whether it's Melvin Gordon getting that ring for the Super Bowl, Ronald Jones, Jerick McKinnon, free agent. Pacheco's there, but what sort of insulation do you think he has, and how do you think the Chiefs address that position in some form?
Well, I don't think it's that valuable of a spot, to be totally honest with you. Like, he doesn't really catch passes, right? That's my concern with him, is he doesn't catch passes. Wasn't running a lot of routes. You had that going to other players. And
well, can I ask you this? We've said this before, and this will be the Kenny Gainwell theory, that if you put a depth chart together and you say you have Jerick McKinnon and you have Isaiah Pacheco, if you're going to have Jerick McKinnon do something, what are you going to have him do? And just like if you have Kenny Gainwell, what are you going to have him do? Well, you're going to have him catch passes more than grinding it up the middle. And so I guess I would say, unless you have a Jerick McKinless world, I don't think on like Pacheco. I actually, he looked relatively comfortable in the passing game. I was actually going to look up his prospect profile here really quickly while you go. But yeah, I mean, I think that is maybe more of an incomplete than we know for sure on Pacheco on the passing game thing. But I just know if you have McKinnon, we saw the perfect storm over 2 months with McKinnon, but that if you have him healthy, that's probably going to be your preferred option. And maybe it doesn't speak as much negatively about the other guys there.
Yeah, that may be. I was worried even when he was out there, they weren't targeting very much, right? That's right. Even you can still draw on something from his low target rate when he was actually running routes. Like that can give you something. And I mean, it does say something when a team decides to play someone over you. So, I mean, those would be sort of the concerns that I would have. I'm just peeking at his prospect profile as well.
Well, yeah. And just to go back, he had he had a 28% receiving score in my model and a 0.6 yards per route run, which is 1.0, 1.1 is pretty stock. So you would say he probably has a ceiling of 25, 30 catches at most in an NFL season. If he was the starter, and that they would supplement with more of a pass catching option. So just for putting all the details together there. So yeah, I mean,
Jordan Howard on a winning team,
right? Are they going to look for someone that pairs well with him that is more of a receiving centric option? And the Chiefs again are in that seat in the late first round where is Bijan Robinson falling? Is that Jahmyr Gibbs? Is that is someone that they're looking more in the pass centric vein? And guess what? McKinnon's out there. There's plenty of pass centric guys that would pair. And like you were saying, it might be a fade spot in terms of it's a high flying offense. It's a big notable spot NFL wise, lead back for the Kansas City Chiefs, but that doesn't mean it has top 5 to 10 upside fantasy wise for the lead running back.
Correct.
All right. Big show. And that is going to do it this week, talking NFL free agency, some of the biggest storylines for your dynasty teams. We talked about DJ Moore in depth. Good information from Jordan on his profile, ways to package up. We found a couple different iterations there in trades this week. We talked Tony Pollard. We talked about those excess wide receivers, as well as the moves coming for some of these NFL teams that have occurred already and still to come. David Montgomery being one of the interesting ones to drop just before airtime this week for the Dynasty Show. I am Chad Parsons. He is Jordan McNamara. And until next time, good luck in your Dynasty leagues.